It isn't unusual to compare our brains to computers since they are both capable of processing information quickly. We expect to make decisions logically based on all the information we have at hand. But most of us don't understand how a computer works. Similarly, we may not fully comprehend how our brains work either. In truth, a lot of our decisions can be made in the blink of an eye, and this happens behind the closed door of our unconscious. They are choices that we can't even explain to ourselves, even after lots of reflection. This is the premise that Blink elaborates on. It focuses on how our unconscious can make decisions in a split second, which can be as good as a choice made after months of forethought and analysis. However, they can also be devastatingly wrong and bring out lasting consequences. According to Malcolm Gladwell, we can train ourselves to make better snap decisions. With practice, we can make our instincts and gut feelings, created by our adaptive unconscious, increasingly accurate. You've probably heard countless times about how important it is to make a good first impression. But why is that? Whenever we are in a new situation or meet someone previously unknown, our brains carry out what is known as thin slicing. Our unconscious is capable of finding patterns in situations and behavior based on very narrow slices of experience. What this means is that, when looking at the entirety of something, we focus on specific aspects that are particularly relevant and important. Our brains automatically throw away the extraneous details and get at the heart of the matter. From there, we get our first impressions. Essentially, what thin slicing does is give us as much information as possible from the least of what we are presented with. Based on John Gottman's system of thin slicing, he can identify whether or not a married couple will make it through 15 years together from just a short clip of the couple's interaction. We undergo a similar process when we interview for a job. Instead of getting to know us over months, interviewers make decisions about our characters based on much less than that. It's all well and good to be able to make quick decisions, but can we really trust something we don't understand? The answer is no. Knowing something without understanding why is too much like a blind guess, and we don't want to rely on something that has no basis in reality. The thing is, when we try to figure out the reasons for our decisions, we can find that we were wrong about our impressions. Based on a study conducted on participants of speed dating, we find that what we say we desire and what we are attracted to can be very different. Regardless of what we say verbally, our unconscious might deny it vehemently without us realizing it at all. It can then be said that there are two parts of us, with both of them at times working against each other. Our unconscious is always active, picking up on details that we don't see and acting as a valet to ensure that we behave correctly. The trouble comes when we try to explain how we're thinking. Stereotypes can be misleading, or worse, they can be downright wrong. However, our minds are influenced by what we see around us and how we are socialized. Thus, stereotypes can guide the way we view the world and what choices we make from the depths of our unconscious. We can be tricked by our brains into perceiving someone who is tall and handsome as smart and reliable when we don't have the proof to make those decisions. This is where priming comes in. Our behavior can be altered when we are exposed to certain stimuli, whether they are pictures, words, or culture. When primed properly, our actions can change. Experiments testing the effects of priming has resulted in people walking slower when primed with words that bring to mind getting older or becoming gray. It is also able to make someone wait patiently for someone to finish talking, as opposed to interrupting the conversation and getting things done so they can leave. What all this means is that our unconscious grabs at the clues we don't internalize and prompt us to act accordingly. We can be influenced by our environment into behaving more like what is the acceptable norm. The unconscious is good at filtering out irrelevant stuff, but sometimes you can still get overwhelmed by the information presented in front of you. After all, we want to know that we have made the best decision, and we think that can be guaranteed by weighing each option we have. One thing we can do to enhance the ability of our unconscious to make quick analyses and prompt decisions is by creating conditions for successful spontaneity. We need to streamline our thought processes and prioritize certain aspects of the situation above others. Gladwell shows us how this can be done through Cook County's protocol for dealing with patients with chest pain. Doctors tend to err on the side of caution when it comes to potential heart attack cases. Being cautious can be great, but it also takes a huge toll on limited resources. By focusing only on the symptoms at hand and cutting out details like age, weight, and gender, the hospital was able to diagnose heart attacks more accurately. Thus, we must produce an environment that provides a balance between deliberate and instinctive thinking so that we can use our conscious and unconscious to best make our next moves. We know that first impressions matter a lot. They set the tone for our relationships with the objects and people that we interact with in life. This is why thin slicing is important. However, it is also possible to thin slice wrongly. The book shows us that using a blind sip test is the wrong way to thin slice Coke as a product. Beyond that, it also describes how experts and the general public can differ in opinion. Market research is being increasingly used for estimating how well a product will do in sales before officially launching it. But in the case of the Aeron chair, we can see that the public can have a bad first impression but come to love the product later. Essentially, this is because the brain is very good at pointing out what's different. Unfortunately, it isn't that great at deciding whether that form of difference is good or bad. It jumps first and tends to classify the item as bad instead. The only way this hardwiring can be overcome is by gaining knowledge and becoming an expert. As someone with more experience, you will be equipped with the skills and language to be more discerning with your opinions. There are situations where your unconscious brain does its thin slicing work wrongly. These circumstances arise when you are in danger and primed to protect yourself and ensure your continued survival. This condition is called over-arousal. When you are over-aroused, time slows down and sounds become muted. The way you process stimuli changes. The brain fails to see what is right in front of it and misinterprets information. Anything can be a threat, and your body is in such a state that it shoots first and asks questions later, sometimes literally. To avoid stressful situations from shutting down our ability to think and function acceptably, we must practice performing tasks like calling for emergency services. Police officers and bodyguards have this kind of training too. By making ourselves get used to stressful situations, we make time for us to be able to react appropriately. A shooting can be over in less than a handful of seconds. With practice, it will become the difference between ducking for cover and freezing like a deer in headlights. Our unconscious dictates a lot of our lives without us even knowing about it. Most of the time, we don't even have a clue that our brains are taking down so many tiny notes and making decisions based on them. Even when we're told about it, we probably won't believe what we hear. That's the scary part of our gut instincts. Knowing that the environment influences our brains we're in, and the way we're socialized can help us be more aware of the choices we're making. Our unconscious turns nuances into absolute truths that are programmed into our reactions and behaviors. Not all of them are good, and many of them can be destructive or biased. Therefore, we need to be able to look through our unconscious decisions and see the mechanisms working behind them. This can be difficult to do in real life, but it can be done. Women have only recently been included in orchestras because of a long-held belief that women cannot play well. When blind auditions became the norm, orchestras began hiring female musicians. This shows us that our minds can be biased just based on what we see, and judgments are made even before we consciously try to make decisions.